The problem is, I think postmodernism has, to a large extent, run its course. Fiction, for me, mostly as a reader, is a very weird, double-edged sword. On the one hand, it can be difficult and it can be redemptive and morally instructive and all the good stuff we learn in school. On the other hand, it's supposed to be fun.
Interesting.
Consider postmodern?
Yeah, check 1, 2.
Welcome back to the Jordan Wigington Show. We're already talking. Glad to have you. So it is considered one.
Yeah, according to... Okay. So, this is crazy. Postmodern novels. Look at this. This is going to blow your mind. It's a novel you've heard of. Oops.
Really?
Why would that be considered postmodern?
That's a crappy list.
Yeah, I'm saying. This is not true.
Yeah, and Lolita's not either.
I've not read that.
Dude, I had to stop.
It's
horrible. It's horrible.
Yeah.
And it sucks. Here's
why.
It's
like Jeffrey Epstein's plane. Wasn't his name? Is it about an underage girl or something? Yeah.
Here's the thing. I don't know that I've experienced more beautiful writing in my life.
Of course. Really?
It's stunningly beautiful writing.
That's the worst.
By the way, we're talking about Lolita. It's a novel about a guy who is quite sexually attracted to underage girls, specifically in the 11 to 14-year-old range. He calls them, what did he call them in the novel?
I've never read it, so I'm still a Christian.
You need to next time you go to the bookstore, flip through a couple pages in the beginning and just catch this guy's prose.
Okay.
Everyone's like, Cormac McCarthy's got the best prose in the last 100 years. Unfortunately, it's this guy.
Who wrote it?
He said some Russian name guy.
Well, I do have to say something really weird that shocks me. On this list is a book that I brought that I wanted to tell you about, that I read.
What is it?
It's called The Master and Margarita. It's a Russian guy.
Yeah, you told me about that last time. It's on my TBR.
Dude, I reread it. It's going to sound like I'm exaggerating. I read it twice this month. I literally read it through, and then on the way to Guatemala, I got the audiobook and listened back through to it.
So it's that good?
I thought it was incredible, but it was on the list. I need to understand why it's considered postmodern. I would not have thought that.
Well, this obviously it kind of comes with the territory of the term postmodern, that the definition can be anything. I guess. Maybe they're just saying that because like postmodernism kind of started around the 1900s and all those novels.
Well,
is it the date thing, you think?
Not to be boring, but I mean, I would like to hear how you think or define it, because I have something very specific in mind when I think of postmodernism. To me, and it's going to sound like trying to be pretentious, but like in the early 1900s you have Einstein's paper, whatever, 1905, and the theory of right, and then at the same time around that time you also have Sigmund Freud kind of breaking through with his subconscious, unconscious talk, and so it's like all of these things that were stable, Newton's, science and understanding of the universe, of how the laws of nature worked, as well as our understanding of ourselves, those things get upended. Like, it's no longer, the theory of relativity, which I don't know, beyond like one sentence. But everything that was stable and consistent kind of gets turned upside down. There's different forces even within ourselves we don't understand. And it seems like the center of gravity of our understanding just kind of erupts. And then you have surrealism, right? You have cubism, like Picasso. You have all these different arts reflecting what's happened in science, that like nothing is as it seems, things are disjointed.
So you think it happened, its roots in science?
I think it is. I personally do think that it's traced back to what happened with Freud's like theory of the subconscious, or unconscious. And
I
then
had heard that it started in education, actually.
say more.
My sources are not unbiased from hearing this. It's a kind of like a Christian orthodoxy nationalist type of deal where if they want to overtake the Christian culture, the best way to do that is start an education.
Okay.
And the idea that truth is subjective being taught would then spread to.
Okay.
But I don't know if that's in fact true. It would make more sense that it would start in science with
well,
Einstein discovering, hey, did you know that time means different to two different places type of deal?
Yeah, and that's when I think of postmodernism, I very specifically think late 1800s. Nietzsche writes, God is dead, right? So there is his works don't really start taking effect. People don't really start hearing about them until 1900s. So you've got this religious thing of God is dead, evolution, the whole
Darwin is around that time.
Yeah, and the whole school debate about evolution being taught in schools in the 20s. What is it? Is it William Brian Jennings? The famous monkey trials or whatever.
The monkey trial
That's
thing.
in the 20s, I think. So you've got in philosophy, God is dead. You've got in psychology, Freud saying we've got forces within us that are repressed and we're not aware of. Then you have science saying Einstein turning the Newtonian physics upside down. And I'm saying that I think that each one of those, they end up bleeding into the arts. And then you have a total revolution in the arts. You have, again, surrealism, Dada. I don't know if you've ever seen Dadaism, like very bizarre, Cubism. And then in music, that's where I've done the biggest deep dive of like listening to postmodern classical musicians in the 40s and 50s, like Bartok and Oliver Messiaen. And
Can I just take a stab?
Yeah, just one thing.
What that would sound like?
Yes.
I don't want to say dissonant.
Dissonant, absolutely.
But what's the scale called where you just go whole notes till you get back to like C to C, but only using whole notes, no half steps?
The scale?
Yeah, there's a certain scale.
Or a mode?
I don't know if it'd be, but there's something we learned in theory where there was a scale where it was just whole note or whole steps.
Yeah.
No half steps like E and F or B to C.
Right.
It was just whole tone. From what I bet it would have something to do with that because if you ever heard music built on that, it's
horrible.
weird.
And I've listened to a ton of it. And there's a particular guy that I think it was Oliver Messiaen, but he's this classical postmodernist in the 40s and 50s and 60s. And one of the things he says is because there is no center in life, right? There's no meaning, there's no center. That music, he said, I want my music to reflect that. So there was no tonal center. So he's got no key. Quaid described it best one time. He said it sounded like a drunk cat crawling across the keyboard. But so when I think of postmodernism, that's what I think of complete upending of any type of meaning, of any stability, of clarity, and just a descent into relativism and total, like, solipsistic subjectivity.
Yeah.
And to me, if it yielded truly beautiful art consistently, I would change my opinion. But I think musically, it's a catastrophe. Then there's some pretty art, but a lot of it is obnoxious.
That's interesting to me because a lot of I was a metal kid, and I would classify all the bands that I genuinely loved as postmodernists. Like,
but metal music,
not all of metal music, but like the bands that I truly loved. The Chariot.
Yeah.
It was as dissonant as it comes.
Yeah, I remember. Thanks, Micah. Wally.
Converge, dissonant, rage-inducing, and then there was a band called The Number 12 Looks Like You. I'd have classified all these bands as grindcore, which is not really the correct term, but it was just really fast, dissonant music.
Mm-hmm.
Well, The Number 12 Looked Like You was a cool band because they would do all that stuff, wild, but they had like really apt guitar players, and they would go into these great jazz interludes out of nowhere. And to me,
there's another band like that. That is one of the only bands I've ever loved that's in that world.
Between the Buried and Me kind of did that.
Is that them? Between the Buried and Me.
Yeah, but they weren't really as like.
I liked that band.
Dissonant in their chaos and their metal, like when they were doing heavy stuff. These other bands, they were wild.
But wouldn't they break
harsh.
into like legit jazz? Those guys were incredible. Anyway, go on. Sorry.
They're good, but bands like that, and to me, that's kind of how you do it, because you're not showing beauty at all. You're showing aggression. And then they would add in the beauty, but they would change modes or time signatures or keys or whatever. And then they would show, whatever. Like, it was usually a juxtaposition of, like, this is the worst thing ever, so our music is going to sound like that. But, like, the beautiful parts, even though lyrics are sometimes still depressing or chaotic, stuff like that. But yeah, I haven't seen very little modern art that's beautiful.
Well, last thing I'll say on that is that, again, like there's certain aspects that I can appreciate. Like if you say, I'm going to write this symphony or this piece, or I'm going to write this one novel, and it's going to reflect these postmodern ideals, that's cool to me. But like as a whole movement, just repeatedly, like that's what you're cranking out, I don't think it has any teeth. And how can it? Especially with writing and novels, and it's hard for me to see how you could sustain that in a meaningful way, because what's your center? Like on what grounds can you really make
a claim?
Yeah. It only goes so far to me. And again, artistically, this is a personal thing. I am a romantic. I'm a sucker for just beauty. But I just don't find it beautiful. And then in a philosophical, like literary sense, I don't see how you can make a point and take yourself seriously.
Yeah. That summarizes really well. Let me ask you a question. I was thinking about this. This is a thought that I've had for the past couple of weeks. I'm editing my book for real this time. And,
which one?
The same one that I've been working on forever.
Jordan writes a novel a week.
Yeah, I've rewritten this one like 1,000 times. I'm hung up on. There's one conversation I'm hung up on. It's just a phone conversation. That's the only thing I'm hung up on. But in this book, my main character, he gives a soliloquy out loud. So he's by himself. He's narrating the story, but in the story, he is by himself and he just speaks aloud into the atmosphere.
Did you share?
I don't know if I've talked to you about this.
Because you showed one soliloquy to me that was.
This isn't a poem.
Oh.
This is.
That was a sonnet. I'm sorry.
It was a sonnet.
Yeah, sorry. Go ahead.
It was a very funny sonnet.
It was well written.
Yeah, I'm quite proud of it, how easily that came about. Anyways, he's talking about his own life and how he's the most ironic character ever. He's very contradictory. And something happens. I don't remember the exact setting, but he calls somebody, he's like, that person was a hypocrite. And he's the biggest hypocrite in the story. And he goes on just a ramble of what is hypocrisy and what is the difference between hypocrisy and irony, and where does paradox come into play? Like, what are the differences between those things?
That's cool. That's very interesting.
And
what are the differences between hypocrisy?
Well, it starts. What's the difference between paradox and irony?
Okay.
And paradox, he says, is for the truth. You make a paradox to be true. You make an irony to be funny.
Okay.
But then what is a hypocrite then out of all that? And I was just want to know is, well, how do you differentiate between, like we were talking earlier, about sincerity and irony, and how do you feel about all those things in literature or in everyday life? Because in Jane Austen's character, Elizabeth Bennet says she loves the absurdities in humanity. She likes to laugh at them. And I think that's why Jane Austen is so good, is because she was able to see the hypocrisy in all of humanity and laugh at it.
Nice.
And and enjoy it rather than be depressed by it. Whereas David Foster Wallace sees the hypocrisy or these postmodernists, and they get depressed by it. So how do you feel about things of that nature?
That's fascinating. Okay, so I guess irony on a simple level. I think of irony as I think of irony as you are saying something or making a point by actually saying the complete opposite. Like,
it's kind of the idea,
right? Okay, but you are making a point, though. Would that be on the surface how you would think of irony?
Yeah. Well, I think of irony when I think of, I don't know how familiar you are with Jane Austen, but her mother in Pride and Prejudice, the mother, Miss Bennet, she is the epitome of silliness and ironic. In page 4, she makes a comment about her neighbors. Is like, they're Miss, I can't remember her neighbor's name, but Miss So-and-so, I despise her, I don't like her, I have no opinion of her, and her daughters are not handsome. And then 300 pages later, she says the literal opposite. Oh, I think so highly of her.
Okay.
And I have so great thoughts about her. And her sisters, though not handsome, I cherish them still.
Okay.
It's just funny to me.
That is funny.
But like the she's a liar of the most preposterous proportion. That's how I look at irony, is just lying but funny.
Okay. I guess I don't think of that makes sense. I guess I tend to think of irony a little differently because
I could be wrong.
No, I could be too, but I don't think of it as lying. Like, to me, that sounds like somebody that doesn't know themselves, or that is capricious and changes with the wind or her mood. When I think of irony, I think of like characters that you've written or talked about, that they are it's an exaggeration of certain features of them, but you're actually making a different point. I don't know. To me, irony has a very specific goal and aim, and it is trying to say something or critique something.
Yeah, but it always seems like it's supposed to be caught with a smile on your face.
I agree. Yeah, but to me, the difference would be that lying feels like it is totally different. I don't see a link at all between those two. I guess I'd have to think about it more.
And I'm just mainly talking literature, but I was thinking about this. In today's age where truth, this is in postmodern critique, I guess. In today's world, truth seems to fail. So maybe we should start lying a little bit. And what I mean by that is, if we're going to write allegories and try to, as Christian people, try to do good, instead of telling the truth, why don't we start lying? And what I mean by that is the truth is suppressed. It's not failing, it's suppressed, and it makes people mad. So why don't we create a fiction, an ironic paradox, or make books or write books or songs that address the state of the world, but in a way that we're lying to people where they can get on board with our story and not realize they're getting some great work of Christian art.
And you see that as lying?
Yes.
Okay.
Subversive.
Okay.
It would be
That's
the better word.
That's where I would not see it. I'm not saying I disagree. I would see that as a great use of irony.
Chesterton said something about it might have been, I can't remember who it was, the greatest truth or sometimes have to be told with a lie being like a parable.
Mm-hmm. It does keep, it requires you digging and looking and going deeper. Maybe I just don't like the word lying, but
I like it for this purpose because it's funny.
Have you ever heard the term didactic? Like years ago, I was reading a book. I don't remember what it was, but it was about writing, and it was critiquing certain types of fiction writing. And I don't remember the authors it named, but it said one thing that you want to be careful not to do as a writer is be overly didactic. And didactic has to do with teaching, and the idea was like, don't be so on the nose. Make your points through character, make your points in a slanted way, and make the reader have to find it. And so I think that in art and literature, being overly, I think right now, so much of our art and culture is horribly didactic. Everything's in your face. Like, do you know what I'm saying? Like, everything, movies, songs, not everything, but a lot of the pop stuff is. So, yeah, I definitely agree. There needs to be more depth and not so on the nose. But yeah, I guess what makes good art is how skillfully you're able to do that. You're able to make your points without being so, because that's why, isn't that part of the reason why Christian movies can be so corny?
They're horrible.
They're so on the nose, though. You know what I mean? It's, in fact, some of the greatest movies I've ever seen that I would call Christian are not Christian movies. But the themes, you know what I'm saying? The underlying themes and philosophy are.
Well, it's like Lord of the Rings. He swears up and down that it's not an allegory.
Yeah.
But come on, dude.
Yeah, right.
That's why it's the best. And that's why C.S. Lewis, sorry to people who like the line, it's horrible.
Yeah? I've never read that. I've read a lot of C.S. Lewis, but not his fiction.
When I was like 13, my brother got really into it when the movies came out, so I was like, let me have one of those books. And as pretentious as I was at 13 years old and stupid as I was at the same time, I was like, he's trying really hard.
Is he? Okay.
He's trying really hard. I read the first space novel he done, and it's better.
Now, I did read that last year, the space trilogy.
Yeah, I read it off of your
Paralandra, the second one. Read that book.
I'll check that one out.
Anyway, sorry.
But it seems better. It's still pretty on the nose.
Yeah, it is on the nose,
But it seems better. And that's one thing that I don't like is when people are very on the nose and preachy, specifically about Christian values.
Yeah.
But even other values as well, like, I don't know.
Yeah, whatever they are.
Yeah.
That's what I mean about secularly speaking. Like, it could be, you can take any topic, like gender, sexuality. We are not, in culture, you don't get a whole lot of that stuff told to you subtly. It's very on the nose in front of you. And it's like, come on, somebody artistically deal with this stuff.
I've got so many thoughts about that. Luckily, I'm in a rare position where I can see both arguments and see them well.
Which of what side?
Of largely anything. You pick a topic, and I can cope and sympathize, not empathize, but I can sympathize with any viewpoint, and I see it well. And one thing that I don't want to get into that because I don't have my thoughts collected on it well enough to speak. I don't think, but
well, to be clear, I was speaking about artistically dealing with stuff. Okay.
Yeah. But it's why comedy is so effective. It's why Joe Rogan is able to sway a ton of votes, and why Shane Gillis and all those guys, because funny is a way to subversively, it's an art.
Yes.
And it's a way to subversively deal with an issue that can get through even the hardest of heads sometimes.
Yes.
But yeah, I think
I heard a quote the other day I absolutely loved. I don't know who it was. I didn't recognize the name, but it was, comedy is just a serious way of being, it's just a funny way of being serious. I love that. Go ahead, sorry.
Yeah, we need a little more irony in the world, and
Comedy is simply a funny way of being serious. Yeah.
and that's one thing that's missing from a lot of modern literature. I mean, it's mostly, let me say, the best-selling fiction is largely a female audience, largely female authorship, and I'm for that. Everybody should read. You should read everybody. My favorite author is Jane Austen, so don't come at me, feminist. But like the stark difference between, and I know I'm on her Jane Austen again, is the irony. She was able to play a joke with the reader, have fun with the reader. Nobody has fun with the reader anymore.
That's
Nobody
interesting.
does fun things anymore with the reader. Or Jane Austen perfected the style that's called clear and direct writing. And her last novel did it the best, Emma. But in Pride and Prejudice, there was a few parts where the narrator says things that are completely not true. It's blatantly a lie. Like, I will never dance with him again is what Jane Bennet would never dance with him again, or Elizabeth. And then 20 pages later, she's caught off guard by Mr. Darcy. He asks her to dance, and she agrees to it without even thinking. And it's stuff like that all the time. And people are too scared to mislead people anymore in writing, I've noticed. Or like if they do want to mislead them, it's very blatant, like in crime novels or something like that.
Oh, you're right. That's not the same.
It's not really the same thing. But like in the narration, like we're afraid to let people think one thing.
Well, I would like to hear why you think that is, because one of the things in my own practice of writing and doing is realizing that the way that you write is like a crystal clear window into how the author, think of other people and your audience. And a lot of times, to me, it strikes me as these writers or creators, they must think very low of their audience, because you think your audience is so dumb that you have to put on the nose. But I think that's one area. But why do you think that is the case? Because you read a lot more modern stuff than I do. And so for you to say that it's that way a lot it must really be that way. Why do you think it is that they don't want to play with the audience or don't want to lead them a little bit? Or
I don't know. It just, everything's really on the nose, didactic, like you said. But it's hard for me to say. I think it's a lot of insecurity as a writer, obviously, which all writers are insecure about their work. But like Jane cared more about making sure you heard the characters rather than you heard the story. That makes sense. Okay. It was about characters more than necessarily the story. Because if you look at any Austen novel, they're largely kind of the same in some sort of way. Some girl gets the guy in some genteel British society. But like every single character is themselves. Like you could read me a quote from any of the Jane Austen books that I've read, and I could probably guess who said it. And I don't know of any novel where anybody is created in a plethora of characters like Jane Austen. Shakespeare's done the same thing too. That's like Harold Bloom said, he created human nature. And he might not be wrong in that claim, but they create characters, a lot of these great authors do. And nobody's creating characters much anymore. They might have one, but they don't have a lot.
I have an opinion on part of not the whole thing, but I think part of the reason is because people are writing to make a point. And I think that when an ideology is guiding your writing, everything is in service to this singular point you want to make. But when there's nothing wrong with having an idea and an ideology, but when you are making characters and you're writing a authentic characters and letting the story lead you in this kind of magical way. You can shape certain things to make a point, but I think modern authors have some things backwards.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense? So what I'm saying,
good example. I'm reading Mansfield Park. It's her.
I love that you love her so much. I've got to read Jane Austen.
Or fifth novel. I can't remember, but it's the one she wrote directly after Pride and Prejudice. Pride and Prejudice. The main character is a girl, and she's kind of a handful.
Mm-hmm.
Like, she's real charismatic. She's not afraid to speak her mind. She's confident and all this stuff. Well, her very next novel is about a girl who's none of that.
Mm-hmm.
She's in a well-to-do home, taken in. You forget she's there. Like, the main character is Fanny Price, and you forget she's even in the story at all. Sometimes she's very timid, scared of people almost. There was a dinner party scene. There was 9 people sitting at this table, Fanny Price being one of them, and the only person Jane Austen told you who was talking was Fanny Price, because her voice, she hadn't had time to really tell you what her character is, because by the nature she just doesn't talk about. But 9 people are talking, and she never once tells you who's speaking.
You told me that she's like a god at this.
Yeah, but it's usually just like 1 or 2, like 2 or 3 people. This is the most absurd one I've ever seen. 9 people.
That's phenomenal. You
It's
don't
hard.
know how hard that is till you try it. Yes.
It's hard to read, but you have to take your time, and you have to work through it and read a spot.
Pay attention.
Now, who is this?
Yeah.
You can't just read it stream of thought like in Pride and Prejudice. She very rarely tells you who's talking, but those characters are so polarizing in that book. I know this is Darcy. I know this is Jane or Miss Bennet or whatever.
But still, it was
impressive. 9 characters.
That's impressive.
9 characters.
Yeah.
And it's
wow.
It's to have faith in her own writing.
Yeah.
And these characters that she thought up in her own head. People don't think about character development like that anymore. Not in modern books at all. It's a guy, he's got some sort of autistic tick. He has to go to therapy. He's got a bad past. He's got to take care of his mom. He doesn't have a dad, and a girl that doesn't have a dad is, it's fine storytelling. It's fine. I'm not saying but there's no character development there. Like, you have to tell me who's speaking because they haven't done their work in this. And that's one thing that I've grown to really respect, is if an author can impregnate my brain with those characters.
Yes.
David Foster Wallace did it very well too, but he would only do it with like 2 people.
Yeah.
Jane's done it with 9 now.
Yeah, it's phenomenal.
Yeah, it's. I think it comes down to confidence in your ability to create worlds, create beauty and art.
Yeah.
I'm just checking the time of the recording.
What time is
34 minutes. We're good. About 20 more minutes.
Okay. Yeah, I also think that skill factors in, whether someone's, good enough to do that. But I also, I can't deny, I also think that your opinion of your audience also plays. Like, to me, what you're saying about Jane Austen, who I know a Wikipedia page about, but I've never read, all those things immediately make me feel respected. Like, she respects me as an audience, as a reader, that she's not going to say, you're an idiot who can't figure this out, so I'm going to spoon feed you every point I want you to make, I want you to believe, and every character. No, it's like she respects her audience and her reader enough to let them have to discover things. And again, nowadays, I tend to think, these writers or movie creators, do you have no respect for your audience? Or are you just dumb and not gifted? Or what is it? Because that spoon feeding says a lot about the author and about their opinion of the audience, and maybe about the audience as well.
It's quite clear in modern literature. When I say that, I'm talking about rom-coms. I'm fine with it. I'll read them. I'm not talking. I don't want to talk bad about anybody's work, because I know the work it goes into that. But at the same time, it's stupid people writing books for people that they think are stupider than them.
Yeah, well, it sounds like it. Honestly,
but it's not true. They might be stupid. I don't know, but they are writing at a very low IQ level for an audience they think's even stupider than them. when it's not the case. Some of these chicks writing these books, if they really wanted to, they could do some great work. I've seen it.
That's tragic. And people are not stupid.
And the majority of readers, if they sat down and just tried, they could do it.
People are not dumb. I truly
in
do
some
believe
aspect,
that.
and when it comes to reading, they're not.
Yeah.
They could be as intelligent as they wanted to be.
Right, because of course there's dumb people out there, but like I don't think that people are as stupid as sometimes they get a rap for.
It's almost like they fall back on ignorance, or they fall back on being spoon-fed because it's just easier.
Yes.
And like they don't understand. It's just like with anything, lifting weights, running. It's hard, so I'm not going to do it. Well, your life gets worse and worse if you don't do something active. Same thing with the brain. If you're not, it stinks at first reading Infinite Jest. You mean you can't just out the door read Infinite Jest or some other crazy novel, but it reads challenging stuff, and it'll eventually be. You'll quit focusing on it being challenging and more on the delight you're getting, just like with running or any physical discipline. I've noticed that you need to challenge your brain, and it'll quit being such a dredge and a hardship before long.
I agree completely, and I don't like pithy little absolutes, but there's a phrase I do kind of like that. How you do one thing is how you do everything. I like that idea. That how you do one thing tends to be how you pattern your actions. But like you're saying, the more that you do something, not only the stronger, it gives you more self-respect, but like in terms of reading books or a movie and having to dive deeper into what it means to think about it. For me, at least, I'll just speak for myself. That has sharpened the resolution through which I see the world, like seeing people more deeply, taking a longer minute to look at a piece of art or look things up or wonder. I don't know. I guess what I'm trying to say is I think the practice of having to dig a little bit for meaning and a deeper substance with books, I think you're giving your audience a gift. Because not only are they having to think about things and dig a little bit, but hopefully that'll become a way of life for them. Do you know what I'm saying? About just in general in life, whether you listen to music or a movie or conversations, not just going through life on autopilot and taking everything on the surface face value. I think the practice of reading, and having to think. And I'm like you, by the way. I do think there's value and a place for romance novels and things that are easy.
Yeah,
that's a good thing. But when that becomes the norm,
well, it's just like you can't live. You can't only eat cake.
Yeah,
sure,
right. Exactly.
Sure,
Okay, perfect example.
You can get your calories through that, but you're not. You're gonna have
that's
a really
perfect.
bad life.
Right. Exactly.
Just sweet treats, but like if you sometimes I will forever read Carly Fortune's books. She's a romance novel out of Canada and writes like a Canada beachy books. They're nothing as far as of substance, but she writes well. They're good. I like them, and I'll always read hers. But I've been so burnt out on most stuff. I won't read any more modern romance novels.
Well, you've read them all.
No, I mean I have, but like except for hers, I'll read hers. But like I'm done reading anything that's.
Is it because you feel like you've gotten a general?
I get it.
Okay.
But I still think that everybody should read Shakespeare, Austen, and modern literature, because those two knew how to create characters. And how else are you going to see where the world's going? How are you supposed to have any insight into what people really have in their heart if you don't read their books?
Yeah.
And if you want to know what the modern American woman is thinking, what they feel, read their books. I started reading them because I wanted to be able to write women characters better.
Nice.
And I feel like it's helped. But you get a little insight into their experiences and their successes, their strengths, their weaknesses, and their desires. It's a good way.
It is on the spot, but is there a novel or two that you would say serves as a good example for kind of understanding the cultural consciousness or mood of the modern woman, or maybe by the Fortune woman or anybody? I just wonder. I know it's on the spot, but I wonder if there's anything that kind of
Verity
typifies.
by
What is
Colleen Hoover.
What is it?
Verity.
Verity?
That I don't think it was meant to be, but that book is brilliant. But I'm pretty sure it wasn't meant to be. But it was just such an interesting take. If you read it, thinking about
I'm gonna look it up.
culture.
And who'd you say it was by?
Colleen Hoover.
Colleen Hoover.
She's a very popular author. And Abby Jimenez wrote one called.
I remember when you posted about this book, or sent me a picture of
Yeah.
the Verity.
Abby Jimenez wrote one that was really good. That I actually hated the book, but it was an interesting look into the mindset of the female population, as far as what they desire, and romantically. But
50 Shades of Grey was no. I'm just kidding. What is the movie? What is the book?
the Abby Jimenez one,
Yeah.
I can't remember the title of it. It was the second one in a series. It's a red cover. It's something about letters. P.S. Abby Jimenez or Jimenez.
Okay. Abby. I just want to look this up because I'm curious.
Let me see.
I don't know how to spell it, to be honest. I don't know that name. I think that's fascinating, though.
Yours truly.
Yours truly. Okay.
With respect, because she's written the second best romance novel I've ever read. That one is the worst.
Worst as in?
I hated it.
Oh.
Hated it. And it's from an ideological standpoint that I hate it. But she's a much better writer than she is in that book. She could write so much better than she did in that book, and I know she can.
Interesting.
She had insecurities in her audience. So she made it explicitly clear. She kept telling the reader, "Hey, this character is severely has a social anxiety, severely bad."
Mm-hmm.
She kept telling you, like, she would say the words, "He is anxious. He has social anxiety," but she was showing it way better than she was telling me.
I wonder
and
why
it got annoying. She just lack of confidence.
That irritates me. It really irritates me.
And she's better than that, because the one that followed that book up is, when I read it, it was the best. I actually did a video on the YouTube channel about it. How it was, I thought it was great. Storytelling was great. So I know she was capable of it, and I don't know why. Maybe it was an editor or publisher or something. I don't know. We got a couple more minutes.
Well, for the last few minutes, any other?
I still feel like I've talked most of the time.
No, I've talked. Any other?
What have you been reading besides the Margarita book? Anything?
Yeah. There's. I read 2 other books this last month. I've actually read quite a bit the last 6 weeks, but one of them is called The Image, and it's nonfiction, and I brought them, but it's about how, I think the subtitle is like how pseudo events have shaped America, but the whole book is about the development of journalism, or the way that journalism has been shaped in the last 60 years or so with television, and the horribly detrimental effects that it's had on the population, on journalism, about just manufacturing pseudo events, and really the dishonesty, and one of the phrases like the commodification of news, to where news has become like a commodity that it's sold, bought and sold from a particular angle, and how truth and fact has kind of gone out the window. And then the other one was a book called Amusing Ourselves to Death, and it was written, I think, in the 80s, but it's just about how media consumption has and continues to destroy us. And I'm trying to move away from media, like, more and more. So I
Same.
thought those books would help me kind of put some meat on the bones of shifting and pushing away from media, because I increasingly feel like it's a bad thing.
It's not good.
And I know there's obviously so many things that are good about, like, that you can make a case for, that I appreciate, but by and large there is something very addictive and consuming about our phones and media, but also the nature of what we're bombarded with, and kind of what you've talked about before this with Infinite Jest, about the whiplash that he has in the book with this horrible event and then a joke or something.
Well, it's like that video that went around. It was like some horrific accident or something like that. Like horrible happened in the news, and it went to the Burger King commercial with the jingle.
Yeah,
I can't remember what it was.
That's
it's
perfect. That's
Come on.
perfect. And I don't know if you've heard the term compassion fatigue, but in licensing school in 2015 for ministry, we had several lectures at the school, and one of them was on something called compassion fatigue, and that in professions where you're having to work with vulnerable or traumatized or, broken people, that if you're not careful, that overexposure and constant involvement can lead to compassion fatigue, and the results of that can be really detrimental, physically and mentally, to where you kind of run out of compassion for people. And it's not because you're a bad person. My point is, though, I think that we are in danger in some ways of compassion fatigue with how much we are bombarded with nonstop trauma, drama, and catastrophe. And it also seems like it has consumed the modern mind to where 90% of conversations I feel like I hear people having are about bad things going on politically and culturally. And I don't think that's good. I don't think that's a good thing.
It's not.
Yeah.
Well, let's end on that note.
Okay.
Real depressing. Go read a book. I recommend you read David Copperfield by Charles Dickens this week. What do you recommend?
The book The Image by Daniel Borstein, or Amusing Ourselves to Death.
All right, now maybe I'll throw that behind us on the screen
Yeah.
here. Who knows? But thank you.
Yeah.